Welcome once again to the book log. Today I am going to be talking about The Sun Also Rises by Ernest Hemingway. I feel like Ernest Hemingway is one of the few authors whose reputation as a person has sort of eclipsed his actual work as a writer of books. He's this almost mythical, larger-than-life figure who hunted and fished and drank and boxed, and he fought wars, and he lived hard and fast, and he was tough and macho in a way that somehow came through in his writing. His style is often described as very sparse and simple and punchy. He's a strong man and he doesn't have time to play your fancy word games. If he's got something to say, he's just gonna say it. I don't know why I find that all so interesting. There aren't a lot of guys like that anymore. Certainly there are no writers with this kind of mythology around them at this point. It's interesting because a lot of the stuff is sort of at odds with how I felt reading The Sun Also Rises. To be fair, this is just one of his several books, and it was also one of his first books, which he wrote as a relatively young man, so who knows what changed in the intervening years. But I found this book to be actually pretty emotional in a lot of ways. Maybe it's emotional in ways that aren't actually all that at odds with his reputation, but nonetheless, this book wasn't quite what I was expecting. First of all, it doesn't really have a plot. It's all atmosphere and character. It's narrated by a man named Jake Barnes, who is essentially just recounting a stretch of his life. He and a small group of American and British expatriates are living in Paris in the years following World War I, and their lives essentially consist of almost nothing besides drinking and getting drunk in various different bars and cafes around the city. There's a pervasive sense of malaise to everything they do. Jake was wounded in the war in some unspecified way that left him impotent, and as a result, a big portion of this book is about his relationship with a woman named Brett Ashley. They clearly love each other, but because of Jake's injury, they can't be together in any conventional or satisfying way, and so there's this constant tension hanging over them the whole time. There's actually a lot of tension throughout this book, but it's very subtle. There's a sort of romantic love square going on between these three men, Jake, Robert Cohn, and this guy named Mike, with regards to Brett. Like I said, Jake and Brett have a real connection but can't be together. Mike is actually engaged to Brett but is dissatisfied and is generally kind of a boisterous asshole, and neither one of them seems to like each other very much. And Robert Cohn is obsessed with Brett, but in a groveling, obnoxious sort of way, so none of them are good fits for each other. There's another guy named Bill who's friends with Jake, and that pretty much rounds out the friend group. Everyone in this friend group acts very restless and anxious. It's like they can never stay in one place for long. Their conversations are constantly trailing off or changing subjects mid-thought. They are never direct with one another. No one openly articulates what they're feeling, even when it's obvious that they have something on their mind. It honestly kind of stressed me out at times. Both the way they talk and the way they behave makes it seem like they're running away from something, as if staying still or speaking plainly would force them to confront the emptiness in their souls. A lot of people will say that this book is a sort of psychological portrait of the lost generation of which Ernest Hemingway was a part, and which consists of people born in the late 19th century who came of age during World War I. These characters are painted as disillusioned and disconnected and unsure and kind of hollowed out, maybe by the war itself. That's why I think the plot here is deliberately minimal, because the real subject isn't what happens, but more the psyche of these characters and how they think and feel and how they view the world. This book has two very distinct halves. The first is them just aimlessly drifting through Paris, and the second takes place in Pamplona, Spain during Fiesta, which is the annual festival of San Fermin, with a bunch of parades and religious processions, and of course the running of the bulls and the bullfights in the arena. And this is where the book really comes alive for me. First of all, this is where I must gently push back against the notion that Hemingway's writing is extremely blunt and simple, at least in this book, because the way he describes Spain here is incredibly beautiful and incredibly detailed, I thought. He talks so meticulously about the weather and the sky and the landscapes and the rivers and the mountains and the architecture and the people and what clothes they're wearing and what all the bars look like, what tables and chairs they're sitting at, what specific food they're eating, and what wine they're drinking. He also describes the bullfights and the bullfighters themselves, like Pedro Romero, with exquisite detail, going into almost every single physical motion they make and what its purpose is, and he portrays them as so artful and authentic and disciplined in a way that the main characters are decidedly not, even though personally I do think bullfighting is a pretty fucked up concept. But I actually thought this part of the book was incredibly vivid and immersive, and you can tell Ernest Hemingway both both actually attended one of these fiestas in real life and that he had a real reverence and respect and love for it. The fiesta is just so colorful. He paints the town with so much warmth and humanity. He describes all the different dances and parades they did, the immense hospitality everyone shows to them, how no one ever lets them buy anything, everyone sharing everything with one another, this really beautiful sense of community and festivity. It's an amazing portrait of a really specific time and place, but it also works as a contrast. Like, while this extraordinary spectacle of humanity and connection is unfolding around them, these characters continue acting like spoiled children, just drunkenly bickering, jealous, insecure, weirdly anti-Semitic, and just incapable of fully participating in the beauty in front of them. This is one of those books whose reputation I think is carried, at least in part, by its very famous and very succinct last line, which is, "Oh, Jake," Brett said, "we could have had such a damned good time together." "Yes," I said, "isn't it pretty to think so?" Which is just a perfect distillation of the thesis of this book to me. I really love it when a book nails the last line. I think it kind of captures the entire emotional architecture of the book really well in just a few words. It's romantic and kind of resigned at the same time. Throughout the book, there's this sense of longing without fulfillment, these conversations that circle what the characters want to say but can't. They're reaching for some ephemeral thing they can't quite hold on to, and it's almost never acknowledged. These characters are just pantomiming their way through their hollow lives in a way that's kind of unsettling to me, but that final sentence is them accepting the illusion. Again, this book kind of surprised me. I think I had some incorrect preconceptions that a Hemingway book was supposed to be all dramatic and macho in some way, whatever that means, but The Sun Also Rises is very restrained and tender and emotional, and I think it's really beautifully done. I'd give this book a solid 8 out of 10.